Hi everyone, and welcome to Horror Spectator. If you're new here, consider subscribing. We dive deep into the darkest, most chilling real-life horror stories out there. And if you're a returning viewer, I'm so glad to have you back, friend. In this video, we're exploring 3 terrifying stories that took place in the Appalachian Mountains during one of my absolute favorite natural phenomena: thunderstorms. I've been wanting to make a video on this topic for a while now, but I decided to wait and post it today for 2 main reasons. First, October and thunderstorms are the perfect combination. Second, well, it's my birthday, so it just felt like the right time. Thank you so much for being here and for choosing to support this channel. I truly hope you enjoy this video as much as I enjoyed reading and putting these stories together. If you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's head back into the mountains. And remember, viewer discretion is advised. What I'm about to tell you happened to me last year, around the middle of October. But before I dive into what actually went down, I just need to give you a little context about why I was even in a place that isolated in the first place. The reason I'm pointing this out is because everything happened during about 2 weeks of massive storms. It rained all day. It rained all night. And this exact week this year, it's been the same way. It hasn't stopped raining or thundering. And I don't really know why, but this weather dragged me right back to that time, and I figured maybe it was time to finally talk about it. Basically, I lived with my parents until I started working in another state, and finally got a little bit of freedom. But about 1.5 years after working there, I ended up getting into a fight with a coworker, and we both got fired. Let me just make it clear. It wasn't entirely my fault. Of course, it was wrong to punch someone at work. It was childish not to control my emotions. But I swear I had reached a point where I just couldn't take it anymore. He was the kind of guy who had been harassing me since day one. He'd pull pranks on me, talk shit about me, mock me. I had never even given him a reason to act that way. We had never talked about anything that could have triggered some weird reaction, and I never treated him badly. But for whatever reason, he developed some kind of obsession with me and wouldn't leave me alone. So after punching him and us getting into a fight right there in the office, we both ended up without jobs. With no real prospects of finding something new right away, I had to move back in with my parents. It was supposed to be temporary, just long enough to get back on my feet and figure something out. But the months kept dragging on and nothing came up that would actually allow me to leave. And the thing is, once you've lived on your own and had your independence, moving back in with your parents is honestly one of the worst things that can happen to a person. One day, I was having coffee with an old high school friend, and he picked up on how miserable I was. That's when he told me about this cabin he owned, right in the middle of the woods, where he usually spent his summers. He'd only go there once a year and stay for 3 months. He basically offered me the place for the winter months, rent-free. All he asked in return was that I kept the place in shape while I was there. I hesitated a little at the idea of being in the middle of nowhere, but at least I could drive right up to the cabin. And like I said, I was desperate. I remember leaving that coffee shop with this rush of excitement, like for the first time in a while, I had a way out. I even walked home in pouring rain, not even caring about getting soaked. 4 days later, I was leaving my parents' house with the car packed and headed straight to the cabin. I had thought about waiting for the storm to calm down a bit, because driving through the woods with low visibility wasn't exactly safe. But the forecast said the storm wasn't going to let up for at least another week, so I figured it was better to just go. Another week trapped in that house with controlling parents, knowing I had an alternative, would have been unbearable. So yeah, 4 days after being handed that escape, I was on the road, driving toward the cabin. The trip would take about 2.5 hours, and since visibility was low and I had to take it slow, I left early in the morning. The road was tough, winding through nothing but forest, and for about an hour I didn't see a single sign of life except for a few isolated places that hinted someone might live out there. When I finally arrived, I couldn't believe how incredible the cabin was. It wasn't nearly as small as I had imagined, and it was fully ready to live in. I can't even explain the rush of pure excitement I felt that first week. I was free from my parents' control, free from that suffocating job, and for the first time in my life, it felt like the forest was giving me a clean slate. Maybe the storm was some kind of sign, a moment of chaos before things finally settled. I was convinced of it. I developed this little routine during that first week, spending my days between exploring the inside of the cabin and wandering around just outside whenever the rain softened enough to actually see the forest. At night, I'd light the fireplace, crack one of the windows open, and just soak in the darkness of the woods, the sound of the storm, and the crackle of the fire. I swear I'd never felt that kind of calm before. It got to the point where I was actually looking forward to nightfall just to hear those sounds. But obviously, the last thing you should ever do out there is keep the windows open at night in the middle of nowhere. The sound was so soothing that one night I actually fell asleep on the couch with the window wide open right above me. I woke up around 4 a.m. to what sounded like something breaking, like glass shattering. And that's when I saw something that froze me to the core. The fireplace was still burning, so its light cast this flickering glow across the floor. And right there, cutting through that glow, were footprints. Footprints I knew weren't mine. They had a clear direction, starting right at the couch where I had been sleeping, which meant whoever or whatever came in through the window had climbed in right above me. The thought alone sent a kind of fear through me that I'd never felt before. The footprints went toward the fireplace, then toward the smaller couch pushed up against the other window. Whoever had entered had sat there, watching me sleep. Another thought that made my stomach drop. Then the footprints led to the kitchen, the direction of the sound that had woken me up. I snapped out of the initial shock just enough to feel that heavy, unmistakable sensation that someone was still inside with me. I crept toward the fireplace, grabbed the sharpest tool I could find, and crouched in the corner, waiting. That's when I started noticing even more details that made my skin crawl. The footprints were bare, but the shape wasn't normal. They looked warped, twisted. And from the kitchen I could hear this breathing, quick and shallow, mixed with what sounded like a whimper. It was like someone crying, but it wasn't human crying. Not really. I shifted my weight because my legs were going numb. And without realizing it, I slipped and hit my back against the wall. The sound wasn't loud, but it was enough. The breathing stopped, and in the middle of the storm outside, there was this heavy silence filling the cabin, like it was swallowing every bit of sound except the rain and thunder. Then it happened too fast for my brain to keep up. Something, or someone, shot out of the kitchen into the living room and leapt through the window. It was so fast, I barely had time to react. And I swear to God, I had never felt terror like that in my life. It wasn't running upright like a normal person. Or at least, not completely. Its back was arched in this way that reminded me of someone really old. But there's no way someone that old could move like that. That speed, that agility, it wasn't right. It took me several seconds just to process what had happened. But when I finally managed to snap out of it, I ran to the window and slammed it shut. That's when I saw it. In the middle of the darkness, between the trees, two glowing eyes were staring right at me. I locked every window, every shutter. The kitchen was a mess. Two glasses shattered on the floor, and in one of them there was this weird, black, sticky residue. I have no idea what the hell that was. But I spent the entire night on edge, cleaning up everything, wiping away the muddy footprints from the floor, trying to hold myself together. By the time the sun came up, the cabin was spotless, and all my bags were lined up by the door, ready to get the hell out of there. Of course, I told my friend everything, but I honestly don't think he really believes me. All he said was that he'd never seen anything like that out there, but he'd keep an eye out. To this day, I have no idea what I saw that night, but it was without a doubt the most terrifying night of my life. It's funny how clear that night still feels to me, even though it's been, 3 autumns now? Must have been mid-October, because the trees up here on the ridge had already gone that deep burnt orange and brown, and you could smell the wood smoke from miles off. We'd had a long stretch of dry days, and when the forecast said a thunderstorm was rolling through, I remember feeling weirdly excited, like a kid again. I've always loved storms. It was something I inherited from my mother. Whenever there was a storm, she was absolutely captivated. She'd stop everything she was doing just to absorb the sound. I remember sitting with her many times doing the same thing. And because of that, whenever there was a storm, I not only loved listening to it, but also felt that warm, cozy sense of nostalgia. Those childhood days when the only worry was playing. It was definitely something I passed on to my kids. Ellie was 9 back then, and Sam had just turned 7. Both of them had that same look in their eyes when they heard thunder, like it was Christmas morning. My wife, Marla, hated it, said storms made her anxious. Anyway, we live way out deep in the Appalachians. Not quite West Virginia, not quite Tennessee, but somewhere in that messy in-between where the roads turn to gravel and you lose cell signal after the second turn. I'm not exaggerating. That's really how it is out here. Our nearest neighbor's about 5 minutes away by car, maybe more when the road's washed out. We were lucky enough to inherit this house from my parents, who unfortunately both passed away quite young. But the house itself was perfect, ideal for raising our kids. Both Marla and I wanted to bring them up surrounded by nature and far from the chaos of the cities. That night, the sky had been heavy all day. That kind of weird yellow-gray color you get before a storm. Around 8, the wind picked up and the first thunder rumbled across the ridge. The kids came running into the kitchen all smiles, begging to sit out on the back porch to watch it roll in. So we bundled up in hoodies and ran outside just as the first fat drops started to fall. The porch light buzzed, the screen door slammed, and the smell of rain hit. That damp, cold, earthy smell that always means fall's really here. It's definitely one of the best smells in life. Now, the back porch overlooks a big slope down into the woods. Beyond that, nothing but darkness and trees that go for miles. I had my old radio playing low, the kind that still picks up stations from God knows where when the air's right, and we just sat there, me, Sam, and Ellie, listening to thunder crack and roll like it was crawling over the mountains. My wife stayed inside, curled up by the fireplace in her favorite reading spot. At some point, lightning flashed bright enough to light up the whole yard, and Ellie pointed, dead serious, out toward the tree line. "Dad, someone's out there." I laughed at first. I mean, it's dark. The rain's playing tricks on your eyes, right? But then another flash hit, and this time I saw something. A shape. I couldn't tell what it was, and I thought it might have just been a tree or a trunk with an odd shape. But I looked closer, fixed my eyes on the spot. And then I saw it again. Looked like a person. Standing still, half hidden by one of the trees at the bottom of the hill. My stomach kind of dropped. If it really was someone, and they'd been watching us, they'd probably realized we'd seen them. The kids started pointing right in that direction, and I kept staring for a long while. I told the kids to go inside and turn on the back floodlights. They didn't argue, just scrambled in through the screen door. I stayed put, waiting. The lights came on, bright white cutting through the rain. But there wasn't anybody there anymore. Just empty yard and wet grass bending in the wind. Which meant it wasn't just a weirdly shaped trunk. It was something capable of moving. And scarier than seeing it, there was the fact that it had been there moments before. But now I didn't know where it was. Didn't know if it had gone away or come closer. I told myself it was probably an animal. Hell, maybe even a deer standing weird. Nobody had ever come that close to the house before, but plenty of deer had, so that had to be the explanation. My wife had always loved animals, and sometimes they'd wander closer when she was around. Maybe it was a scared animal looking for shelter from the storm. But I still locked up every door in that house, front and back, and told Marla what we'd seen. I added that we should stay alert, but that there wasn't much reason to think something was wrong. Whatever it was, it had gone away. I felt bad lying to her like that, but I didn't want to ruin the night without a good reason. We settled in for the night, storm still pounding the roof. Watched some dumb Halloween movie with the kids till about 10. Eventually, we got them to bed, or tried to. Not 15 minutes later, Sam came out of his room pale as paper. Said someone was knocking on his window. My whole body tensed, and Marla's face went petrified. Now, you gotta understand. His window faces the woods side of the house. No porch, no easy way to reach it. Meaning no one could possibly just peek in or knock on it. Maybe he was still scared from what he'd seen outside and was making it up just so he wouldn't have to sleep alone. Either way, I wasn't going to ignore what he'd just told me. So I went upstairs to his room. I took the flashlight with me since by that point the power had already gone out. But when I got to his room, I was absolutely horrified. Lightning flashed again, and for a split second, I swear I saw a man's face. Just a shape. But it was there, right against the glass. I yelled, grabbed my old man's gun, and tore out the back door before Marla could even stop me. Rain coming down sideways, thunder so loud it shook the siding. I ran around to the side, where Sam's room was, but there was nobody there. I stood there for a long moment, looking around, trying to figure out where he'd gone, how he'd even managed to look in through the window. But when I turned toward the front, I saw movement. A man, wearing a hooded coat, slipping around the corner of the house. I ran after him, feet sliding in the mud, heart hammering in my throat. I was obviously terrified, but I wasn't about to let him lay a hand on my family. But by the time I rounded the corner, gone. Just the wind and the sound of the rain. That night, we all stayed in the same room. Marla and I awake, listening for any noise. The kids were in our bed, all of us pretending to sleep, but really just waiting for another knock, another flash, another sound. But nothing else happened. Morning came, and with it, the storm calmed down. For a good 2 weeks afterward, we were all pretty tense. We installed security cameras around the property and reinforced the kids' bedroom windows. But nothing ever happened again. We never saw any man, and we have no idea what he wanted. It's strange how something that shattered my life still smells the same when I think about it. Wet leaves, cold metal, that sharp electrical bite in the air right before a storm breaks. I can close my eyes, and I'm right back there. 15, pissed off at the world, half-packed boots not walking straight into the worst night of my life. Everything I'm about to tell you happened more than 30 years ago, but it changed me forever. Especially the way I react to thunderstorms. Back then, my parents were dirt poor. Hell, everyone in that tiny mountain town was. Poor doesn't even cover it. It was straight up miserable. No real jobs, just endless days working yourself to the bone for scraps. My family wasn't any different. And I guess that's part of why everything went down the way it did that night. It was pouring harder than I'd ever seen. Thunder cracked like it was splitting the sky in half, shaking the paper-thin walls of the piece of shit house we called home. Calling it a house was generous. Parts of it might as well have been outdoors. Rain leaked in through the ceiling. Cold wind slipped through holes, and every storm felt like a fight to keep warm and dry. My dad had just come home from work, pissed off like always, ready to unload on me and my mom. I could tell it was going to be bad the second he stepped inside. There was a way he moved, the way he yanked off his boots, that meant he needed to break something. That night, I was done. Tired to the bone. I wasn't going to let him take it out on me again, and I damn sure wasn't going to watch him lay a hand on her. I told him he was a coward, that none of it was our fault, that he didn't have the right to dump all his shit on us. He let me finish talking. Then the slap came hard and fast. My face lit up with pain, but I didn't cry. I snapped. I shoved him back with everything I had. He stumbled, lost his balance, and smashed the back of his head against the corner of a piece of furniture. Panic hit me like a wave. I thought I'd killed him, but he was still breathing. My mom and I dragged him to the bed. I couldn't handle everything burning inside me. Anger, fear, guilt. It was too much. So I threw the front door open and just ran. We lived out in the Appalachian Mountains in Pennsylvania. Running off in the middle of the night wasn't new for me, but doing it during a storm like that was. I sprinted through the fields, rain soaking through every layer, the sky lighting up in white flashes. Eventually, I got scared of getting hit by lightning, so I stopped under a cluster of trees that offered a bit of cover. I was drenched, shivering, but burning up inside. Without thinking, I let out this scream, raw and furious. I lived in a place where I could scream all I wanted. First, it was almost impossible for anyone to actually hear me, especially with the storm roaring like that. And second, it was night. Nobody went into the woods after dark. Not ever. And definitely not after hearing a scream. I was dead wrong. Not even 30 seconds after the scream, I felt something move on my right. I turned, and there was a man. Hood pulled low, holding something long in his hand. It looked like a baseball bat. And the second I saw him, I just knew. He meant me harm. I tried to step back, but he lunged forward and swung. Then, everything went black. When I came to, my head was pounding. It was dark, and the air smelled foul, mold, rot, something sour. I knew exactly where I was. Not far from my house, there were these old ruins everyone called cursed. People said ghosts roamed there. But what scared us more than ghosts was the fact that it was falling apart. The only thing still standing was the shell of an old church. I'd been there before, with some friends. My wrists burned like fire. I realized my hands were tied behind my back with some kind of rough rope. It dug into my skin, too tight. Like whoever did it wanted to make sure I didn't move an inch. Then I heard a voice and realized I wasn't alone. I couldn't make out what was being said, just the tone. I knew that voice, which made it worse. The door creaked open, slow and heavy, and I heard footsteps fading away. Then daylight slammed into me like a punch. It burned through my eyes, sharp and blinding, and my head felt like it was splitting in two. I don't know how long I stayed there after that. Soaked to the bone, teeth chattering, every muscle locked up. The silence pressed down on me, thick and cold. Nobody came back. It was just me, tied up, waiting for something I couldn't even name. I honestly thought I was gonna die there. Nobody ever came through that area, not unless it was some hunter cutting through the woods, and even that was rare. And it sure as hell wasn't hunting season. Outside, the storm was still raging, pounding against the broken walls like it wanted in. I remember lying there, tied up, soaked, and freezing, knowing no one was coming. Then, finally, the door opened again and a man stepped inside. For a split second, I felt pure terror, and then relief. It was Mr. Buck, our closest neighbor. He was the kind of guy who'd give us potatoes when we couldn't afford dinner. For a heartbeat, I thought maybe he'd been the one who took me. but the panic in his voice killed that thought fast. He was there to help. He rushed to untie me, asking questions I couldn't even process. Who did this? What happened? How long had I been there? I couldn't answer. I just kept whispering, "Thank you," and begging him to hurry. Then the door slammed open again. Another man, the same shadow I'd seen in the woods, was there. The second he saw us, he bolted. Mr. Buck almost ran after him, but I grabbed him with what little strength I had left. I begged without words, and he stayed. He took me home. My mom was sobbing when she saw me, wrapping herself around me like she could keep me from vanishing again. My dad started to raise his voice, until Buck shut him down with a look and a few hard words. There was no police report, no search. No one even knocked on a door to ask what happened. People around there didn't want to get involved. They didn't want trouble. They didn't want their names in anything. So everyone just went quiet, like it never happened. And that was it. Nothing was done. That was it. My parents died young. The house is still there, rotting like it always did. I only went back once, to help Mr. Buck when he was old and alone. One time I asked him how he'd even managed to find me, and he said my mom had shown up at his door, crying and begging for help. My dad couldn't have cared less if I lived or died, so she went to the only person she trusted. Buck told me he'd spent the whole damn night out there searching for me, wandering through the woods with nothing to go on. Any tracks that might have been there were already washed away by the storm. He said he only passed by the old ruins by sheer luck. For a second, he figured maybe I'd run off and taken shelter in the church. He never once thought I'd been kidnapped. I asked him if he had any idea who it was. He said he had his suspicions, and if he was right, that man had been rotting in the ground for a long time. After he passed, whatever tie I still had to that place died with him. I've never gone back. I don't plan to.